Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. No increase to the Bank of Canada's key interest rate today. It's some relief for mortgage holders, but is it enough? What have you been doing to weather this year of repeat rate hikes? And on the wildfires, residents in the Shuswap are starting their slow return, but their communities are now vastly changed. We'll see some of what it looks like now and hear what's needed to rebuild. After 12:30, back to school, back to routine, and back to day-to-day stress. How do you handle daily stressors? That's in our second half. I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Very good to be with you this afternoon. The Bank of Canada is holding its key interest rate steady at 5% today. It's a welcome relief to some people across the country, especially variable mortgage holders. However, in a statement accompanying this morning's announcement, the central bank left the door open to more rate increases if needed. So is today's interest rate decision enough of a break for homeowners? What have you been doing to weather this year of repeat interest rate hikes? Have you cut back on spending, tried to find new sources of income, or perhaps put a pause on saving for your retirement? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, for more on what today's interest rate decision means for housing and real estate, we're joined by Thomas Davidoff. He's an associate professor at UBC's Sauder School of Business. Tom, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, thank you.
Well, this is not really a surprise. It's what many economists had been predicting leading up to today. What do you think were the factors behind this decision?
Well, inflation seems to be getting close to, a target range for the central bank. Certainly heading down big picture from when it was, double digits or whatever at its peak. Maybe not all the way, but we're seeing signs of the economy flirting with a slowdown. Maybe risk of recession's pretty high. So when you're balancing higher interest rates, help to kill inflation, but they also kill the economy. Looks like they're erring on the side of don't put us in too bad of a recession, and inflation might be okay where we are with rates.
And you just said can help to kill the economy. According to Stats Canada, mortgage interest is actually the biggest cause of headline inflation, the biggest contributor. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a tricky thing, right? We measure inflation in part based on housing costs. And in the short run, housing costs go up because of interest rates hikes on mortgage payments.
Right.
And eventually that starts to hit the rental sector as construction slows down. So you might think of it as a bit of an obstacle to interest rate policies affecting inflation. But generally speaking, overall, when rates go up, you can predict people are going to slow down their spending and investment by firms. Hiring will slow down, and that tends to take the gas out of the economy and hence lower inflation.
That is the goal of the Bank of Canada with regard to those 10 rate increases since March of last year. That's something for homeowners, though, to struggle with, for them. What has been the impact over the last year and a half? And does today's rate decision really help?
Well, it's been kind of strikingly muted, the impact. First of all, a lot of homeowners don't feel the impact immediately of higher interest rates. Many people are on fixed rate loans, and those only roll over every 5 years. So you got a substantial chunk of people who haven't seen an increase in their interest rate at all. People on variable rate mortgage loans, sometimes their payments are held constant, sometimes the payments go up. Sometimes the payments are constant until you hit that famous trigger rate, and you need to increase your payment. But it's going to get worse because people are going to renew their mortgages,
Right.
And see higher payments as time goes by. And so every month, more and more people are exposed to those increases.
Right. And so, I mean, and just anecdotally, we have been hearing from people who say either, they're on variable rates because they went with it, previous to these increases, or they've had to renew. And they do say that it has impacted their monthly income and they've really taken a hit. And so when they hear that today the rates stay the same, what kind of relief does that provide?
Well, I think for a lot of borrowers now they're getting into that trigger rate territory, and so yeah, they're not going to have to pay more every month because the rate didn't go up. Short-term interest rates on loans are pretty tightly linked through the prime rate to the Bank of Canada rate. So I think for people with variable rate mortgages, this has it's helpful that rates didn't go up.
Sure, but for how long, right? Because we already heard from the Bank of Canada that it will consider raising them again, depending on what happens with inflation. And so, what kind of ride are homeowners in for over the next few months then?
Well, first of all, something that's just been remarkable is this very small number of borrowers going into default on their mortgage loan payments. We're not seeing panic selling by investors, something that if you were going to spin a nightmare scenario 18 months ago, as inflation started to tick up, you definitely would have thought that was a possibility. So it's actually been remarkably smooth so far. And the value of homes hasn't fallen, which is pretty amazing too. You would think a lot of the giant, 100% increase we've seen in prices over the last 10 or 20 years has been a result of low interest rates, but you've taken the low interest rates off the table, and prices haven't come down almost at all in a lot of property types around Vancouver. But the longer we go, should inflation fail to get killed, if you had 8% interest rates for a prolonged period of time, it's hard to believe we wouldn't start to see more and more owners struggling with payments and looking to get rid of their properties.
People are bristling at that possibility right now, just hearing that. So yes, the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board came out with numbers yesterday saying the market didn't really slow down. But you say that the impact has been muted. Not a whole lot of people have been affected by these rate hikes. But we heard from Premier David Eby last week, right? And then the premiers of Ontario and Newfoundland. Today, Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland saying a rare public response to the decision, saying it's a welcome relief for Canadians. David Eby said British Columbians are really struggling, and it's also affecting the rental market. So what did you make of that then?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting that so many premiers reached out to the central bank. We try to keep the central bank insulated from politics so they don't have to listen. And there's a good reason for that because, fighting inflation is really important and central banks need to be the tough guy with a reputation that people believe that inflation's not going to get out of hand.
But were they then overstating? Were they overstating the impact of these rate hikes then, in your view?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty painful, and it's fine for them, of course, to share information. I suspect, the Bank of Canada has lots of competent people working for it, and they're quite aware of what's going on Main Street throughout Canada. But there's no real harm in reaching out as long as the members of the bank don't feel pressed by the politicians to change their behavior, as long as the information set isn't changing. But no, lots of people are impacted. Even if you haven't defaulted on your mortgage, you're still paying a lot more. And, that means you have less money. Hopefully it's just coming out of, retirement savings or something. But for a lot of people, it means, spending less on food, less on travel. They might want to go on other luxuries. But unfortunately, some almost necessities people are going to have to cut back on.
We're going to hear from someone in a moment, in fact, who has been affected herself. We're speaking with Tom Davidoff, Associate Professor at UBC's Sauder School of Business. He's going to stay on the line to take your calls. And as today, the Bank of Canada announced it is holding its key interest rate steady at 5%. This comes after repeat increases over the last year and a half, though, and with the possibility of more to come. So we'd like to hear from you. Is it enough of a break for homeowners and mortgage holders? What have you been doing to weather this year of rate hikes? Have you been dipping into that retirement savings plan? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690. By email, we are at bctoday@cbc.ca. And right now, we are going to hear from a homeowner who says these rate hikes have been taking a huge financial toll on her household. Zara Tavangar lives in North Vancouver and joins us now. Hello, Zara.
Hi, Michelle, am I right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much for joining us. You actually called into the show last week and we got cut off and couldn't hear your story. But can you tell us a bit about your situation?
Yeah, thank you for following up and reaching out again. But yes, I did call last week. My situation is my husband and I decided to purchase our first home 6 years ago. We have two daughters. At the time, they were living with us because they were both full-time students. Grown-ups, but full-time students, so they were living with us at the time.
Right.
So at the time when we made this huge decision, it was based on the facts that were known to us then, based on our income then, and based on the interest rate that was under 2% back then. And so we did a lot of calculations. So this would be our monthly mortgage payment. This would be the additional costs here and there. So we decided, yeah, we can manage that. And then we purchased our first home. Before that, we were renters.
Right.
And then we, as thanks to our bank advisor, our mortgage advisor, who suggested to do a fixed rate, which was a great idea. So we were fine until it reached its 5 years, and it expired, and we had to renew that, which was less than a year ago. And then it was right in the midst of all this rate hikes. And he suggested this time do it variable because it has to come back at some point. Don't do another 5-year fix. And so it has been only going up. And it has been really hard because my husband and I feel like it's unfair because when we made that decision, it was based on things that we had, the facts that were relevant at the time. And I wish when a government or governor of Canada, Bank of Canada wants to make the change, it would only apply to new borrowers. Not that it's fair to them, but at least they know what they are getting into, what they're getting, like they're signing up for. Having said that, it is actually suffering not only previous borrowers, but the new potential borrowers because our first daughter got married just over 2 years ago, or just less than 2 years ago. And they have been working hard. They have been saving up. They have been hoping to be able to eventually do some down payment for a pre-sale small apartment to get their own house because they are also renters, and we know what renter market is like now.
Sure. So they're trying to buy right now?
What is it? Sorry?
They're trying to buy right now?
They are considering, but it's getting harder and harder for them.
Yeah.
They almost but they are thinking if this is the case, I guess either they may need to move out of Vancouver or they just be renters forever, which is not a promising future either. And what I'm saying is it has been hurting everyone on different levels.
Can you tell me then, Zara, what it's meant for you, for your monthly income? What have you done? What have you had to do?
To be honest, if it was not for the support that we have been receiving from our family, from my father, we would not be able to manage that. We would have to sell our house or move out and become a renter. But we are receiving support. Without that support, it's just impossible.
Did you have that? Did you have to turn to that support prior to last year?
Once it became evident that we were at the end of the 5 year and we had to renew that, we knew that we could not.
Wow. So can you tell me, when you purchased 6 years ago, did you have to go through the federal mortgage stress test?
Is that they do the lower tax that for houses under $1 million? Is that?
It's the test to see whether you could handle a mortgage increase, a rate increase.
Not sure.
It sounds like not, and so it sounds like you couldn't have imagined this kind of situation.
No, not at all. Yeah. And I'm hearing, and not that I know firsthand, I'm hearing that people are actually suffering so much that they are losing their houses, or at least they are losing their sleep over it.
Yeah. And how do you feel?
honestly, like I said, it doesn't feel good, but you are just about to lose your house, or you have to reach out for help, which is okay. You when you need help, you have to reach out for help. But what if I didn't have that support?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it weighs on you for sure. Zara,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to reconnect.
Yeah, and I'm hoping soon this, because that's what our bank advisor has been hoping and telling us, that it has to come down. It has to come down because I'm not relying on receiving support from my father forever. So I'm hoping soon it will come back to the manageable level for us, so we can pay him back. So honestly, it's not. Yes, I wouldn't say. It is really, really a big burden on us, on our family. Yeah.
Zara,
But thank you so much for hearing.
yeah, and thank you for sharing your story. You take care,
Yeah.
okay?
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Zara Tavangar lives in North Vancouver. We've been asking you, along with my guest Thomas Davidoff here, who's joining me to take your calls, a professor at UBC Sauder School of Business, asking you what impact these rate increases have had on you. What have you had to do to weather the repeat rate hikes over the last year and a half? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your phone as well. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. And let's go to Dean, who's joining us from Abbotsford. Hi, Dean. Thanks very much for calling.
Yeah, hi, how are you?
I'm okay. And what impact have these rate increases had on you and your household?
Well, it's gotten tough. The wife had to take another job. She thought she was in retirement, and
She had to go back to work.
She's had to go back to work to give me a hand, and we're pretty disappointed because I don't know. Personally, I study finance a bit, and I've never seen where jacking interest rates has ever cured inflation. And there's only one place I look to all the inflation that's going on, and that's the war in Ukraine. And I would like to see that ended. And too many people getting killed and stuff, and it's hurting too many people around the world to pay for it, and it's hurting too many people over there physically. And our prime minister needs to put on the brakes. He says the budget will just take care of itself, but just inflation seems to be the rule of the day.
Okay. And
anyways,
Dean, no, you touched on the
pretty sad about all this.
external factors there. Can you tell me a little bit more about your situation? I mean, your wife had to return from retirement.
Exactly.
Yeah. When did things start getting difficult for you?
I'd say the last 8 months. Yeah.
What happened?
And I personally think they're going to keep jacking interest rates. I don't think there's going to be an end until they get up around 20%.
20%. Okay, well, we can check that with our guest. But can I just ask you, what happened 8 months ago?
Well,
Was it one of the increases?
Look at the price of oil.
Yeah.
Right? If all the jacking of interest rates doesn't do anything to stop the rising price of oil, and the rising price of oil is inflationary.
Is a factor in inflation. Dean, thank you so
And yet they seem to take food and energy out of the equation of inflation. How can that be?
It sounds like, this must be very frustrating for you, right? Your wife, who was in retirement, having to take on a job to help out with those payments. And appreciate your thoughts on this, Dean, and what does need to be done, and your fears about where interest rates can actually go. Thanks so much for the call from Abbotsford. Let's go back to our guest, Thomas Davidoff from UBC Sauder School of Business. He was saying 20%. We haven't seen double digits since, I guess it was the 80s. But, what are your thoughts on those fears?
Yeah, I mean, if Dean is pretty confident rates are going to 20%, he should short treasury bonds, because the market, thinks rates aren't going much higher. The 5-year, I think, is in the 3s. So people think rates are going to come back down. We don't know when. There's a scenario where things go to 20, and Dean's not totally out to lunch in the sense that global events and supply shocks that are really different from what the Fed can affect by pricking demand. Those matter. And should we defund Ukraine? Or hopefully somebody gets rid of Putin, I think would be the better route. But we'd all, of course, like to see the violence end, and that would be helpful. But there's not much the Bank of Canada can do about that. So they've got to balance the risk of hyperinflation. Again, people just having expectations that prices are going to rise. They sort of have to be tough on that. against they don't want to cause a recession, and so they've stood still for the moment.
Right. What do you see happening then over the next little while here, perhaps next year?
Yeah, my ability to forecast is really limited, so don't pick me because I was wrong. Among my colleagues, I've been relatively optimistic that we'll get back to somewhat lower interest rates. I don't know that we'll see 1.5% mortgage rates again anytime soon for a 5-year, like Zara probably was able to get, or something close to that. But I do think probably we'll see the bank getting to reduce rates as inflation comes back to target levels. Might take some time. And again, all I can say is that the bond market does think rates are going to come down slowly over the next few years based on where longer term Treasury yields are.
Okay. Tom, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you can't look to the future. That crystal ball can malfunction sometimes.
Sure can. And, well, it was very interesting in that way with Zara talking about her purchase. Whether you're a renter or, an owner, you're not getting away from risk in this housing market.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's an ongoing conversation, to be sure. Good to have you with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Tom
Bye-bye.
Davidoff is an associate professor at Sauder School of Business at UBC. We are trying to connect with the regional district in the Columbia Shuswap as well to try and get a sense of what the damage has been from the Bush Creek East wildfire there. We're trying to connect with them at this point, and we'll see if that happens. They are giving a tour in the next half hour to media, and they've been giving a tour as well to residents this morning to see what impact and damage the wildfire has had to their community. So we'll try to connect with them for you. Right now, as students head back to school this week, there are still a lot of questions as to how a provincial teacher shortage is going to be fixed. CBC's Janella Hamilton is looking at the scale of the problem and why no one is willing to take responsibility.
It's an issue in many districts across BC.
19 high school jobs are open. I have, I believe, 6 K1 classrooms that without a permanent teacher at this point.
That's in Prince George, a district Beauregard says has dozens of uncertified teachers on call.
I could tell you that roughly speaking, the North does the worst at recruitment and retention. And our geography is a big factor in that. And cost of living isn't exactly cheap up here anymore either.
The shortage is hurting bigger districts too, like the largest in the province, Surrey, where schools are doing whatever they can to fill the gaps.
If they're not able to get somebody off of the spare board, a teacher on call, then they have to pull internally. So the first places that they pull from are learner support teachers, are librarians, music teachers. And so what happens to those kids that require the additional supports? They no longer get the supports.
The province has added more than 250 teacher training seats in universities and is considering recognizing internationally trained teachers to help alleviate the labor shortage. But the BC Teachers Federation says the issue is a lot bigger.
The view of teaching as a profession, I would suggest, has gone down over years. The compensation, the pay for teachers in terms of cost of living, so in terms of comparing to what your actual cost of living is, has not kept up in almost all jurisdictions at all. And the demands of the job, there is more and more and more being asked to be done with less and less and less resources.
It's tough to know how bad the shortage is overall, so Johnston is calling on the province to release the numbers, just like Quebec did. But the province is pushing back.
The school districts are the employers. They know they are the ones making decisions about the staffing and the resources in a school district and in a particular school. So it is the school districts who would have these numbers.
Some districts do track, but not all.
We got to make sure that staying in British Columbia and joining our public school system here is an attractive situation for recent graduates or people moving to this province. We can't afford to lose any more teachers. And I think if the province isn't collecting that data, for the whole province, they're missing that point and they're not seeing where the trends are.
The concern is without the overall numbers, moving forward and finding a solution will be a challenge, one that may not be solved for years to come. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Janella. And as we wrap up this half hour, some emails from you on interest rates. Mike asks, the way to reduce inflation is to increase the production of goods and services. Cameron writes, why is the positive part of interest rates never mentioned? If you have an RRSP and term deposits, you are finally making a small return. Those that are finding it hard with their mortgages are buying homes that are vastly overpriced in the first place and beyond their means. Thank you very much for your thoughts. BC Today at cbc.ca is where you can reach us. This is BC Today. We're on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on YouTube at CBC Vancouver. And coming up in our next half hour, we are hoping to get a check-in on the Columbia Shuswap Regional District to find out more about the impact of the wildfires there. And we're going to talk about managing daily stress as well with our guest, who's a UBC psychologist, asking you how you are managing day-to-day stress as you get back into the routine. That's coming up after the CBC News Update. And here's Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Evacuees, including some whose homes have been destroyed by the wildfire in the North Shuswap, are touring the area today to get a look at the devastation. More than 220 properties were damaged or destroyed. Meanwhile, the Thompson-Nicola Regional District is planning to downgrade evacuation orders affecting 75 properties in the lower West Adams Lake area this evening. The BC Green Party is calling for a universal school food program. Party leader Sonia Furstenau says it would ensure all kids have access to nutritious meals. She says Canada is the only G7 nation without a national school food program. And as we've been hearing on the show, the Bank of Canada is holding the line on interest rates. It will remain at 5%. Over the past 18 months, the bank has steadily increased rates to try and curb inflation. And now the forecast air quality statements continue for several areas due to wildfire smoke. On the north coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 17. Highs reaching 18 with local smoke, some sunshine, and a chance of showers in the Peace. In the central interior, a high of 15 with widespread smoke and a chance of showers. Highs from 18 to 23 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, sunny and a bit windy with a high of 23 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with highs around 19. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Thank you very much, Rob. You know, I do find I am watching more closely those air quality indexes when I look at the weather. I don't know if you're finding the same.
Well, it's crazy how this has sort of become a normal now,
Yes.
right? That we have to deal with smoke down here, even when we don't have fires down here.
That's exactly right.
It's certainly become a part of the summer, right?
Part of the summer, part of the new norm. I do look at those numbers before I, plan a hike or something like that. It's what I did yesterday, but certainly something we're still dealing with. Thank you so much, Rob.
You bet.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, as well live streaming on YouTube. You can find us on CBC Vancouver, and you can use the CBC Gem app as well. We're also on our website, cbc.ca/BC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for joining us. And yes, to the BC wildfires now. This hour, as you heard from Rob, residents and reporters have been getting a look at the destruction left behind by the Bush Creek East fire in the Shuswap. Now, the fire destroyed more than 225 properties, and the Columbia Shuswap Regional District is conducting a tour for the media in a few minutes. This morning, residents were taken on a tour to view the damage, and the landscape has changed. Tim Conrad is an information officer with the Emergency Operations Center for the Columbia Shuswap Regional District, and he joins me now, I believe, from the Squillax checkpoint at Anglemont Bridge. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes. Thanks for scheduling me again. My apologies to the audience for not being here earlier.
I think people understand, Tim. It's been a very busy day, busy time for you for sure. Can you tell us, what has been happening today so far?
Yeah, so we are allowing the second wave of residents that have lost structures to come in and view those structures. So that's happened this morning. We are now shifting into the re-entry phase. which means we're going to start pulling down evacuation orders beginning at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And we have a phased approach with 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 7 o'clock this evening that will be bringing down various orders.
Can you tell us what it does look like? What did residents have to prepare themselves for?
Yeah, it's for anybody that's been here and been along the Squalox Engelmont Road. When you pull off the highway, it's immediate, the impact that you will see, and including when you cross the highway and start to head down into the Shuswap, the North Shuswap region. And it's significant. The damage is significant, and it's immediate through that first section. So you get your eyes are opened, to say the least, as you go that first little stretch.
What are the changes? How has that landscape changed?
Yeah, so you're looking at very extreme fire behavior through some sections. So what was once a beautiful green and dense forest is now twigs of trees. The earth has been burned off, so there's nothing there but rocks and like a sandy, ashy type substance. And it's significant damage throughout. And one of the things that you'll notice as you drive along is the new things that are in place, all of the work that the crews have been doing. So the hydro poles, and anywhere that a crew is working, you can tell because it stands out amongst the ash that's there.
Wow. And I know when we spoke last time, you described the extent of damage to hydro poles and lines. First, can you tell me then, the residents who are coming, you have this incremental or phased in approach to bringing people back. These are people whose homes are still standing then?
Yes, that's right. These are the fortunate people that are being able to come home to their homes or cottages, which are still here. And they will be able to re-enter and begin to go through the recovery process now of coming back into their community and getting settled. So that will happen in a phased approach simply because we know that it will create a lot of congestion if everybody came back at the same time. Right. So, and we'll be stopping them on their way in to give them some information so that they're prepared going forward into the next steps.
Okay. I'm sure it's been an emotionally draining day for them, and this whole process will be. What do you need right now in terms of rebuilding, recovery? Do you need help from the province, from the federal government?
Yeah, there's certainly going to be needs, and we're still assessing what those needs are, but there's certainly lots of concerns around what the housing impacts are going to be. We've lost things like fire halls and lots of other infrastructure that's been impacted. There also will be potential road impacts and other impacts as the soil has been just completely vanished in some spots. So runoff will become more of an issue in some areas where that fire has burned and that water starts to run off differently.
Okay. Tim, thank you very much. I know you're beginning the tour for media right now, and we'll look to see what pictures come of that and get more information. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
That's Tim Conrad, an information officer for the Emergency Operations Center with the Columbia Shuswap Regional District. And do look to our website, cbc.ca/BC, for those images coming from that tour this afternoon, as well as our news coming up at 6 o'clock p.m. on TV. And at 1 o'clock as well, the province will hold another update on the wildfire and drought situation in BC. And you can stay tuned to CBC to stay up to date on that. It's 12:39 now, 1:39 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. And as we tend to turn towards the latter half of our program here, 12:39, it is back to school, back to work, and back to your regular routine. Perhaps for some of you, that means back to stress as well. We're asking, how do you manage daily stress? What are the main stressors in your day-to-day life? And what are the signs that you are getting overstretched? And what do you do then? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now is Nancy Sin. She's an associate professor of psychology at UBC, and her research focuses on daily well-being and stress and their link to health. And Nancy's been good enough to join me here in studio. Hello there.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, it's very nice to have you with us. This is the week when we start ramping up. I know I had more of my alarms set this morning for sure. We'll be talking about stress and how to manage it, but really not all stress is bad, is it?
No, a lot of stress is good for you. Actually,
okay.
there are many forms of stress in our daily lives that are really signs that you're having an active and engaged lifestyle. So if you are someone who you're a parent or you're taking care of others, you're responsible for folks maybe in your workplace, you have active roles in the community, all of these really important roles come with stress.
Sure.
So we find that those who tend to have more of these like daily hassles, they also tend to have better health overall and more social engagement. So I think avoiding stress is not necessarily the thing that you want.
You would just be locked up in your house all the time.
Right. It's all about how you cope with it.
Yes, exactly. And so it's all about how you cope with it. And so what makes a difference when it comes to how we cope with those daily stressors?
Yeah. So first, I like to think about whether you have control over the situation itself.
Okay.
Like, is there something that you can do to try to make this situation better or to change your environment somewhat? But in a lot of cases, we might not actually have a lot of control over the situation. And that's where your focus could really be spent on taking care of your own emotions and how it is that you're going to handle the situation. So when faced with a stressful situation, it can be helpful to just take a step back and to think about like what's at stake here.
Right.
What does this really mean in the grand scheme of things for your life?
Okay.
And how do you want to respond intentionally?
And I want to make the distinction here. We are talking about day-to-day stresses. We have just been speaking about people who are returning to their homes and seeing the devastation left by the Bush Creek East wildfire. So many people have been going through that, much bigger stress in their lives. Perhaps we can talk about that a little bit and then get to this week. I mean, how do you deal with that when you talk about things beyond your control? This is something that's prolonged. It's not just, something burdensome for a day.
Yeah, these two topics are interconnected. These like big events, these major life-changing events that really stick with you, they also come with a lot of the more minor stressors, like more of the arguments, just the frustration. So coping with the big stuff really takes. It means connecting with others, and I think especially in these situations where there's so much at stake. So one of the first things to attend to is how are other people faring? Like, what can I do? And are there folks that I can turn to help me?
Right, that connection then, looking to help others and seeking help yourself. When it comes to that, whether it's big or small stressors in your life and how you deal, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too, what difference does that make in your long-term health?
Yeah, so I do a lot of research on this in my lab at UBC, and we found that it's not so much how many minor stressors we tend to have in our lives, like that's not really related to our physical health. But if you take a look at the folks who tend to be more emotionally reactive to stressors, that's like when they're faced with a stressor, they have that big spike in negative emotions and they lose their positive emotions. And that is more predictive of inflammation, of bodily wear and tear, poorer health behaviors, poorer sleep, less physical activity. And over time, if you follow folks for 10 years or 20 years, you find that the people who are more emotionally reactive to stressors tend to have higher rates of developing chronic conditions and greater risk for premature death.
Okay, so it's that reaction, how you deal with it, as you've been saying. Let's put numbers out there once again: 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. We are asking you, as you get back into your daily routine, what are the main stressors for you? And how do you know? What are the signs for you that you're getting kind of overstretched? And how do you manage the daily stressors in your life? We're talking about minor stressors, but if you've been dealing with some big stress as well, as so many British Columbians have, how do you deal with it? What are the steps that you take in your own life? Love to hear from you. If you have any questions too, you can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Nancy Sin joins me, a professor of psychology at UBC, and her research focuses on daily well-being and stress and how they are linked to our overall health. And Nancy, you know, we've been talking about wildfires and this week anyway, for people getting back into the routine. So those two things kind of the two ends of the spectrum there. But when we look at just returning to routines, what are the kind of stressors people face this time of year?
Yeah, so for adults, the most commonly cited stressors are overloads. So exactly what you're saying, like being stretched too thin because you're managing things that are happening at work and at home. You're dealing with wildfires and just like smoke and fears.
Sure.
So that's overload. And of all of these kinds of stressors, people tend to have interpersonal kind of tension or conflict. It tends to be the most stressful.
Okay, so it's how you relate to other people. What can we do then when we're starting to feel like this is really affecting me? I'm starting to feel some tension with people in my household. What can we do to stop that cycle?
Yeah, so on the one hand, there's, of course, how you're going to deal with the situation itself.
Right.
But I really like to have a focus on how are you going to handle your own emotions, because that's going to help you to become better prepared to treat others well and to deal with situations with a level head. And so there's a lot of research showing that having good health behaviors is a really great way to help buffer against stress.
Okay.
So if you're physically active, like on a stressful day, even just having some physical activity can help you to be less emotionally reactive.
Okay. So that very day, and that just helps you to regulate your emotions then. And when you're faced with a crisis of sorts, yes, it's how you handle the crisis itself, but what can you do in that moment to control or keep your anger and negative emotions at bay?
I start by taking some deep breaths, counting to 10, kind of try to take that step back. That's so
It's what we
important.
taught our kids, right? Count to 10,
Yeah. So that is really the key to start with. But I think about dealing with stress, not about just in the moment, but even during times when you're not stressed, there are ways that you can be building up your resources so that when you are in those critical situations, you're well equipped to have the mental capacity, the thinking, the social resources, and so on to deal well with it.
What are those resources you can start to build?
One is trying to cultivate more positive emotions. So everything from, you could meditate, you could spend time with loved ones. I love to hang out with my dog. So doing things that are really enriching and rewarding for you, that can help to build more positive emotions. And the people who tend to be happier also tend to be more level-headed and able to regulate their emotions when faced with stress.
Can I hang out with your dog? That might help me. Nancy Sin is with me, professor at UBC of Psychology. We are asking you, how do you manage daily stress in your life? And how do you know when you're starting to feel overburdened and overstretched? And what do you do in those times? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and pound 690. Chris is joining us from Hope. Hi there, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm sitting here looking at all the smoke we got on the mountain.
There's that. We've been dealing with this summer, isn't it? And how does that affect you? How have you been feeling?
Not that well. I have emphysema. I'm in my 70s now, and it's definitely affected my overall health. The smoke has.
I can imagine, Chris, and I'm sorry to hear that. So you're dealing with illness.
Yes.
That's certainly a stressor, isn't it?
Yes, it is, ma'am. I was telling my friend, he says, how do I cope with it? And I got advanced arthritis, and I've lost use of most of my hands. And I took to music. I used to play guitar. and I told him, I said, a hobby, it really can help with stress. Like, I play harmonica now to
Yeah.
lose my mind. But it really helps with my stress. Like when I get really under a lot of stress, like I have PTS from, I was in the Marines. I'm a Canadian, but I served in the Marines during Vietnam. And so I've dealt with stress all my life.
Wow.
And I found music could take me away from it.
Yeah.
Like just get lost in it, especially if you just find a simple instrument. And it just doesn't seem like too many people or children aren't being introduced to it to have like a fallback.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you describe it so well, right? That you just get lost in it, and it's how you cope with stress by playing music. Really wise words, Chris. And right now, then, I guess, how often do you turn to that?
Almost daily now.
Really?
Well, I practice daily.
Yeah.
But when I want to play for this, like I'm under just stress from having to deal with taking care of myself. I get frustrated, and then I just pick up my harmonica and get lost in the song that I'm trying to learn at the time, and it really takes me away from it. It's a great, any hobby I think would be distractive.
Yeah.
Because you get lost in it. Like if it piques your interest, there's so many things that a hobby can be called, I guess, like, you know, like if hunting or whatever you do, like for women, if it's sewing or I don't know, you know, women hunt too. So whatever your hobby is.
Whatever it is for you. Yeah. Chris, I sure, thank you for your service, first of all. And you've been dealing with a lot, and the smoke, of course, has affected people, especially with chronic illness. And I'm so glad you have your hobbies, you have music, and it sounds like you have friends as well to turn to for support, eh?
Yeah, sort of. Well, most of my friends have passed away now. I'm surprised at how many friends I've lost over the years that are baby boomers. They said how many of us there used to be, but it's, my friend and I were talking the other day, and when we hit the 70 mark, so many of us have passed away. I just don't. I'm just kind of surprised at it.
Yeah.
And now with this stuff going on, I hope people are taking care of themselves and keep them busy as you can.
What a lovely sentiment to share with others. And I sure hope that you're able to take care of yourself as well amid the smoke. And thank you so much for calling. May there be lots of music for you coming, okay? Thanks so much for the call.
Thank you.
That's Chris joining us from Hope. What a poignant call. I really learned a lot from his wisdom there.
Thank you, Chris. There were a few points of what Chris had said that really resonated with me. And one of them was him describing this flow state. And that's the feeling of absorption. And he said you could engage in any kind of hobby that really speaks to you. And for him, that's music. But for others, that's something else. And to kind of get into that flow state, you want to pick something that has a bit of a challenge. You know, so Chris was learning a new song. So it could be something relaxing, but something where you're really stretching your limits a bit. And not only does it feel good to be in that flow state, it can kind of give you a respite from the stress of your life. But it also gives you that bit of control when it seems like there's so much in your life that where you can't directly control these situations. Just kind of reclaiming that control through something like playing music, listening to music, engaging in a hobby. That's so important.
Yeah, Chris, it was really my privilege to hear you. Thanks so much for your call. We're asking people how you manage your stressors in life. How do you know when things are starting to feel overstretched? What are the signs for you? And what do you do to try and deal with that? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And Gary joins us now from Victoria. Hi, Gary. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate that. This is such a great topic that you brought up. And I have quite extensive experience. I've worked with a lot of police and veterans in Canada suffering from post-traumatic stress. And And quite recently, actually, we received grants from Veterans Affairs Canada and the Department of Defense to teach veterans in Canada and their family members transcendental meditation.
Meditation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it had been, well documented with research to help with alleviate PTSD and bring down hypertension, etc.
Wow.
And these are the groups that really need it. Our frontline workers, healthcare workers, paramedics, they're all going through the same thing, but in a much more exaggerated way because they deal with it all day long.
Absolutely, Gary. What difference are you seeing in people you work with?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I can't go into absolutely specific personal stories,
Sure.
but I see couples come back together that have been living apart because they've been torn apart from deployment stress. A lot of people reducing their medications because their hypertension's going down, dropping cortisol rates. The serotonin levels go up so people have more balanced moods. It's just, it's probably the most rewarding experience I've ever had teaching any group in society.
Yeah. And you meditate yourself?
Yes. Yeah, I learned back in 1978 in Ottawa, and I practiced it just 20 minutes twice a day, and with great results. And I got, this is great. This is exactly what I was looking for because I was running a small business and the stresses were getting to me, and you're trying to manage, mortgage payments and all of that, just like all of your other colleagues said.
Gary, so lovely to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking my call. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate hearing from you. Thank you. That's Gary in Victoria. I just have about a minute left here, Nancy. Meditation, though, one of the bullet points you'd like to share, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Meditation. It gets to that mind-body connection. There's no way to really deal with stress by only thinking about like it's all in your head.
Right.
To really deal with it, you've got to attend to your body. And we've been hearing about how much your physical health can affect the kinds of stress that you deal with. And it goes both ways. So you've got to take care of both your mental and your physical health.
Oh, it's reduced my stress already just speaking with you today and hearing about these and reinforcing these practices. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So nice to have you with us. One last email here from Lenora. Early in my teaching career, I used stress management skills with my students, but was met with resistance from administration. In my final years, I returned to breathing activities with my high school students at the start of each class. Thank you very much for that. Nancy Sin, Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of BC. That is it for our show today. Thanks so much to everyone who called in the last half hour and shared so much about their stories as well. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for listening and watching. Have a great afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow.